Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to words that Brits and Americans use very differently. Now, there's quite a few of these words, and it's really interesting. Like why don't we use them in the same way? Like an obvious one for me is biscuit. Like here in the UK, a biscuit is basically a cookie. It's and you guys, a biscuit is like a savory type of bread. It's hard to describe because we don't eat what you call a biscuit in the States. We don't eat them here at all. Like I used to think that a scone was kind of like a biscuit, but they're very different. And so what we would call a biscuit, you would call a cookie. We don't eat your biscuits. It's all kind of confusing. And there's probably tons and tons of these types of words. And who better to know all of these words than Lawrence from Lost in the Pond? I'm sure he's going to do a great job. And probably I doubt I might know maybe half of the words that he mentions on this list, but I'm sure there's going to be quite a few surprises. Let's find out.
Now, before anybody starts bashing Americans for changing their name, just know that the term English muffin was popularized by none other than an Englishman.
Was it?
Hello, this video is sponsored by the Great Courses Plus. I'm Lawrence, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond. And one of those memos pertains to words. As the 8th part in a video series that I've been doing over the past year, they're saying that this video is going to be the greatest sequel since The Land Before Time 6. As we've seen in previous videos, Britain and America are two countries divided by a common language. They have different spellings, different pronunciations, and different words for the same thing, but ever so occasionally they have the same words but for different things. Yeah. And for those of you who tuned in for parts 1 through 7 and thought, give me more of this, Lawrence, and because I love words so much and because I love you so much, here are 8 words with different meanings in Britain and America, part 8.
Let's go. AA.
Yeah, AA. And I know what my American viewers are thinking right now.
Yeah, AA. So that's Alcoholics Anonymous in the States. But over here, it's a car company that come and pick you up when you break down on the side of the road.
What on earth is this, Lawrence? You don't have the very important group Alcoholics Anonymous in Britain. And the funny thing about that is that my British viewers are probably thinking the exact same thing about the United States. But the truth is, both countries have Alcoholics Anonymous. And you might think that's quite strange since AA made it into this video. But here's the thing, in both countries, AA can stand for something else. And in each case, it's to do with transport. In the UK, if your car's broken down on the motorway, just call AA, that's the Automobile Association. Now, because everything is just a little bit bigger in the United States, the equivalent group here is called AAA, or the American Automobile Association. But that's not where it ends because, as I said before, the United States also has a use for AA. As somebody who's flown back and forth from the United States via British Airways, I'm well versed in the fact that
American
that airline is often shortened to
Airlines.
BA. And presumably so they can just say, ooh, look at us, we're top of an alphabetical airline listing. American Airlines abbreviates to AA. And speaking of things that fly, that brings us on to this.
A buzzard.
It turns out that America has coined an oddly high number of words that feature consecutive instances of the letter Z, such as jazz, snazzy, fizzle, pizzazz, and faux shizzle. However, England takes the credit for coining grizzle because of course it does. However, there is one word that neither country originated and is used differently in both. Buzzard. Now, I'm no bird expert, but I have learned to talk like Attenborough when I'm in their company.
Honestly, a buzzard, I don't even know what that is. Like, he says it's a type of bird, but before hearing that, I thought maybe it's a kind of insect.
But in the UK and across much of Europe, a buzzard is a bird of prey of the genus Buteo. Basically, it's what Americans might know as hawk, a word that could also have made this list. But somewhere along the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, this particular memo was lost, presumably by a carrier pigeon who had retribution on its mind. Because in the United States, the word buzzard has become a slang word for vulture. And as somebody who lives in a major city, I've seen my fair share of those, if you know.
Is that why Americans say buzz off? Like, is it connected to this at all?
I mean, anyway, speaking of cities, that brings us on to this. Okay, it's true. In both countries, a city can be broadly defined as a human settlement with a large population. But that doesn't always play out, and both countries have their own ways of declaring a city. A city. Growing up in Britain, I was always told that to differentiate itself from just a town, a city must have a cathedral. And this is one of those rules that most of us Brits think is universal, but isn't. We've just sort of been led to believe that because of stories passed down from history. After all, this correlation between a city and its cathedral originated with none other than King Henry VIII.
To be honest, I don't think that's a good enough way of determining what a city is. Because you can have a town with a cathedral, and that town might only have like 1,000 people in it. So that's a city?
Way back in the 16th century, it was he who granted city status to 6 cathedral towns. So, one for each wife. In the United States, this correlation doesn't exist. Here, a city can be large, just like you would normally find in Britain, but it can also be a somewhat important municipality that's governed under a charter granted by the state. And some cities here are quite frankly small. If they existed in Britain, they'd probably be known as towns or villages. And as it happens, city is not the only C word that made it onto this list. And yes, it's safe for work.
Carry on.
Unless you've been living under either a rock or the Rock, you'll no doubt be familiar with those memes and t-shirts and tea towels that say keep calm and carry on.
Yeah.
Especially those of you who are already following the Lost in the Pond Facebook page 7 years ago. And while the original poster was used by the British government as a call to action at the start of World War II, the significance of it in the 21st century has been realised in both Britain and America. So hang on then, you're probably thinking, how on earth did it make this list? Well, as you've seen by now, words and phrases can have multiple meanings on both sides of the pond. In Britain, to carry on with someone means to have an affair with them, which really makes you rethink the country's wartime propaganda. Whereas America's
I mean, that kind of... Among young people, I don't think a lot of young people use the phrase carry on in that context. When I think of carry on, I just think it means just continue with what you're doing, which is probably what I think most of you guys would use that phrase for as well.
use of the words carry on could take us back to our first entry when we talked about American Airlines. Because in American air travel parlance, that small luggage that you can take onto the plane, that we know in Britain as either hand luggage or baggage, is known in the United States as your carry-on or carry-on luggage.
Oh yeah.
Now it's quite easy to see why this one got lost in the pond, because when English was developing in the United States, planes didn't exist. But wouldn't it be nice if we all had a better understanding of how English took shape in the United States? Well now, thanks to the Great Courses Plus, we commence.
Banger.
And that's because the word banger is a type of firework in both countries. You've all seen them. They're the type of fireworks that go bang. That is most fireworks, I think. Actually, in the UK, there are two more meanings. Have you ever seen or perhaps driven one of those motor vehicles that just looks
really
rubbish
old? Yeah.
Because of general wear and tear.
Yeah, a really old car. We call it an old banger. Also, if there's a song, for example, that's really good, you could refer to that song as a banger as well. Or if like you're watching a football game or a soccer game and somebody scores an amazing goal, you could say that goal was an absolute banger. Yeah, there's quite a few different terms. Also, sausages and mashed potatoes. Sausages are referred to as bangers as well. I think banger might be the most versatile word in the English language, or at least one of them.
In Britain, we might refer to such a banged up car as a banger. But don't worry, we don't eat them, some of us. That's reserved for bangers and mash. Bangers and mash? Lawrence, what is bangers and mash? Well, I'll tell you. It's sausage and mash.
Yeah.
There's a wild misconception that this dates back to World War II. In fact, it dates back to World War I. Back then there was a substantial meat shortage, and so sausages were made with a higher water content. And what this did was, it caused the sausages to pop when they were cooked at high heat. And so because of this, they inherited the name banger. And I'm glad to finally clear that up, because one of the questions I often get asked by Americans is, what is bangers and mash? And this could be down to general curiosity, but it can also be down to the fact that here the words banger and mash can both be applied to music. Okay, so admittedly both countries use the term mashup to mean two songs melded together, not to mention the Monster Mash. But Americans might also use the term banger to refer to a song that they particularly like. I suppose
We do that too, though.
another way that one might be a banger is by banging something into the net, which brings us on to this.
Hockney.
One
Hockey.
thing that you probably don't know
Hockney.
about me is that 157 years ago, when I was just 15 years old, I played in defence on a hockey team. And even though I say so myself, I was absolutely rubbish. But this was in Britain, where the word hockey used by itself does not mean the same thing that it does in North America. And it wasn't a puck we were shooting, it was a ball. And it wasn't played on ice, it was played on grass, so long as the football team wasn't in session. That version of hockey is the more popular in the United Kingdom, accounting for the fact that we refer to the sport known to North Americans as hockey as ice hockey. And while we're on the subject of H words, here's another one.
Homely.
Now, I can't quite remember the one in question, but not too long
But doesn't homely, if someone's homely, doesn't that mean that they like staying at home a lot?
ago in one of my videos,
Isn't that how
I
you
used the
refer
word
to it too?
homely to describe my new apartment. And this seemed to cause confusion with my American viewers who went, it doesn't look that bad. They weren't quite as high-pitched as that. And I thought, I know it doesn't. I just said it looks homely. What, did you misinterpret me? Basically, when a British person refers to their house as homely, they mean it's comfortable or cozy, or what Americans would call homey. It was only after researching for this video that things started to make sense. Because in the United States, the word homely is used to describe somebody who's a bit ugly, which makes me realise that Aunt
Is
Mary
it?
Beth wasn't paying me a compliment. And I left the house that day without telling her that it was I that ate all of these.
That's the first time I've heard that. Wow, so if you say somebody's homely, you're calling them ugly. Oh my God. Muffin.
How did this happen? When it comes to British and American differences, perhaps muffins are the finest example of anything you can do, I can do better. And you'll see why that is in a moment, but in Britain, here's what a muffin is. It's a thick, round baked yeast roll, usually toasted and served with butter. I read that on Wikipedia. And does this sound familiar, Americans? Does it? Does it? Does it? It's what you refer to
Yeah, your muffins are kind of like miniature cakes, aren't they?
as an English muffin. Now, before anybody starts bashing Americans for changing the name, just know that the term English muffin was popularised by none other than an Englishman. Samuel Bath Thomas moved from Plymouth, England to New York City in the 19th century. It was there that he opened his famed bakery, and English muffins became his signature item. 150 years later, Thomas English muffins are still widely available in the United States today. So then, for what food item do Americans reserve the singular word muffin? Well, it just happens that this was a conversation that came up on my most recent live stream.
Muffins are typically less sweet and more crumbly than cupcakes, and are usually unfrosted.
That's right, in the United States, a muffin is a confection similar to a cupcake, only unfrosted and less sweet, sometimes even savoury. And you'll never
Interesting.
guess what we sometimes call this in the United Kingdom.
We call them fairy cakes, don't we? I think.
We call it an American muffin, or sometimes just muffin, which is
No, like when I was a kid, we used to call them fairy cakes.
really going to confuse everybody. Thank you for watching the latest entry in
I'm
this
so
series. Let me know in
confused.
the comments below some of your
Very interesting. I feel like maybe words, the definitions of words are changing again, or maybe they're constantly in flux. Because, yeah, some of the words that Lawrence spoke about, the English versions, I was like, what? I've never used those words before. But then again, there are some words that, you know, certain generations of people use that younger people don't use. And there's words that I'll use that maybe 15, year olds won't have ever heard of. That's just how language goes. There's constantly new words replacing older ones and so on and so forth. Really cool video though. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.